Chieppo, and I am an ecological landscape designer. The reason I'm grateful, one of the reasons I'm grateful to be here is I co-authored this book that we're sending around called, yeah, come on, Marie, Cape Friendly Landscapes. And one of the reasons I did it with the Association to Preserve Cape Cod is, and I'm sure many of you can probably guess, is there's a healthier way of caring for our landscapes than what we traditionally do, than what we traditionally know. And it was sort of a good foundation for people to learn what ecological means and what it is, what's involved in taking care of your landscapes that don't involve fertilizers, that don't involve chemicals, that don't, it's just one big system that takes care of itself, basically. So I encourage you, I know they have it here. They also sell it at museums and at bookstores. I don't get any money from it. I was just grateful to be a part of it and to be a source for people to learn how to take care of our landscapes in a healthier way. So I think most of you probably know that when you don't have healthy landscapes, when you throw not fertilizers, but when you put chemicals down, you're really killing the life that's there. And most of it are miniature insects that really are the force of life in many ways that we don't even think about, that we're killing. And the insects that take care of our plants, take care of the food production that we have, and take care of the bugs on our plants that we want to keep. So there are many reasons why doing things ecologically and organically are really, really important. So I'm just going to cover briefly what's been happening, what's been going on, and talk about what really is a healthy backyard and what is involved in it. So nothing complicated, pretty straightforward. So this was from a couple of years ago, and I moved here down in 2021, and I had absolutely no idea. I knew not much about the Cape at all, and now I'm realizing just how delicate it is. And because of the waterways that we have, because of the uniqueness of it, really. It's you all live here for a reason. And I was really saddened to learn, and it's not surprising, but here on this island that is its own entity, to have so much negative impact taking place. So this was from 2023. They literally just did the Cape. It didn't really cover Bourne very much, some. But the red is indicative of water that's in trouble. And again, I'm sure this is not a surprise to you folks. But it's not sustainable. It's not something that we want. And I really feel for people that have properties on water, like the ponds and the lakes, who've been in the family or just bought them, but for years and can't use them anymore. So there are ways we can not work around this, but change our behaviors. So the insects, as I said, they've really been negatively impacted for a number of reasons. One, of course, which is loss of habitat due to new construction, due to trees being taken down, but also the use of fertilizers and pesticides and so forth that just are general pesticides. They just wipe everything out that they come into contact with. So we've had crazy weather. That's not going to change. It's only going to get more unpredictable. Fire, certainly, in areas that we hear about, where fires are happening more and more, and storms. So everything is impacting these animals. So our thinking really comes from agriculture. So agriculture wanting to control the crops, wanting to manage and make sure that as much crop was produced every year. You have to kill the bad guys, and you got to keep pumping that fertilizer. But unfortunately, it came into the world of horticulture years ago. So what we thought in agriculture would now work in horticulture, and it has. It has. And we've reached this point where we're realizing that we can't keep doing it this way. I'm sure many of you have heard about when you're driving down the road, you don't have as many insects on your windshield, perhaps as you used to, things like that. So these little things that, you know, we're not aware of until it happens, right? You don't think about this stuff until suddenly it's gone. Oh, I'm going backwards. So we've had declines in both. So when you lose your insects, you lose your birds. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Doug Tallamy, but he definitely has been the power behind helping people to see the association amongst wildlife, not just birds and insects, but this interconnection that exists amongst everything. And that's basically what I do. So invasive plants are also another huge problem. I see them all the time in conservation lands. And of course, you know, loss of habitat from people just, you know, I don't judge people. I inform people. So that lawn to somebody is absolutely beautiful. I look at it and I think what the potential is. So, and the fact that they probably do put chemicals down and so forth. And that all ends up in the water. So as Dr. Tallamy shared with us years ago, the caterpillars needed for a single brood of chickadees is between 6,000 and 9,000. It's just absolutely surreal to think about. And they don't want to travel very far. They really don't. I mean, think about it. If you're a parent and your little children are over here, you're not going to want to go 5 miles out to find your food. So whatever is not there, they don't get. So our yards can serve to repair some of the tattered fabric of the Cape with choices in land care practices that are mindful of nature. And all of this, so what I'm sharing with you today is the foundation for creating a healthy landscape that brings in the pollinators, that brings in all of the wildlife that people are now thankfully looking for. So in my work, I work with systems. I work with the soil, I work with the birds, I work with, you know, every living entity on a property is what I work with. So, of course, that includes birds and, you know, other insects as well. So the traditional landscape, lots of water, lots of maintenance needed, lots of yard waste, lots of chemicals, you name it. And this was a study that ASLA put out 2 years ago, just showing the contrast of what is needed in a landscape that is sustainable, meaning nature's doing the work for you, versus traditional. And I just mentioned that to you. He's really doing some great work. So I've spoken with APCC quite a bit, and we're really actually at the junction where conservation is great. We have to maintain these conservation points that we have, these beautiful properties that we have. But we also we need to bring them home. We need to start bringing them into our own yards, because we can't just rely on these properties to be the central source of habitat and food for butterflies and bees and everything else. And I always think of, I said to somebody not that long ago, 'tis the season for plant sales, right? Imagine in a neighborhood if one person said, okay, I'm going to get an oak, and somebody else said, I'm going to get, you know, a spice bush, and somebody else said, and so there's some collaboration, there's some continuity of resources for wildlife in a neighborhood. I mean, that would just be, it's ideal, right? It's ideal. So what we do is we create and foster connections. So connections being, as Doug Tallamy says, you know, these highways, these areas that are interconnected that are making it easier for wildlife to access what they need. But the connections also start with, in this instance, I'm going to talk to you about native plants. So there are different descriptions, different definitions. The one I really prefer has nothing to do with political lines or Europe or anything like that. I want to know what that plant is doing right now in a place. What is it doing for wildlife right now? And obviously, it's been there for a while. It's there. It's been there for a while because the wildlife that's using it is helping it to survive. So it goes both ways. It's a symbiotic relationship. The bees and the butterflies and everybody else relies on that pollen, but you know what? That plant is relying on that bird to drop that seed and help it propagate. So these are just some of the reasons that pop off in my head. I could have had a very long list. Genetic diversity certainly being one of them. I'm not familiar, I don't know how much you are familiar with, well, I'm going to get there. Cultivars. So cultivars are not the bad guy. There's no bad guy. But I think it's an issue of ratio. So these are plants that are designed and made by humans that are hybridized and cloned. They typically have characteristics that are considered attractive to consumers. So double blooms, red leaves, variegation, size, you name it. So we do know that plants that are double anything have absolutely no sexual organs at all. Those blossoms take up the space of what normally would have the pollen and the nectar. And so those plants, they're beautiful. If you have a few of those, great. If you have 500 on your property and nothing else, then you're doing nothing for nature whatsoever. But there are studies that are showing that there are some cultivars that perform a bit better than others. And as I always say to people, try to just, as I'm saying it again, think of ratio. So when I design a property, I try to think 70% straight species, meaning a plant that co-evolved with nature, so they have this symbiotic relationship in a particular place. So to me, I could go as far as saying, so we're in ecoregion 89, I believe, or 84. So, what we have here and what we have a bit west of here is fine. So there are some who would say, you can only buy plants that come straight from, this region here. And I don't want to complicate things. But there are plants that exist north and west of here, because you can't go east, or you swim, that are very beneficial to wildlife. So, but I just want to make this point about the cultivars. And whenever you see in a tag that, little quote on either side, like double dipped, rainbow, but whatever it is, that's an indication to you that that plant is a cultivar. So if it just said Echinacea purpurea, that's a straight species. So that's how you know that plants have been hybridized.
I'm getting a little lost.
Go ahead. Yep.
So in other words, if you go to the nursery and you buy your coneflowers, that example, you have to look to see if it has something else on the tag?
So normally, yes. For example, on the tag, it would have, Echinacea purpurea, purple coneflower, and it might say white swan in those, little quotes. So that would tell you that was some material was taken from a straight species, from the straight species coneflower, and it was genetically manipulated so that it then would produce a white flower as opposed to the purple flower. Does that make sense? So it's, oops, am I going backwards?
So you don't want to buy a bunch of that.
Right, that's what
Right, I mean, I work with the Horticultural Research Institute. I have no problem saying, they make plenty of money. I have no problem saying it's best if you can put more straight species in. But unfortunately, in nurseries, the majority of what we have are cultivars or ornamentals.
So we
And-
get a straight.
Right. And I'll just say it now while I'm at this juncture. I'm working really hard to get straight species on the Cape and down here. So I'm working with growers, I'm working with farmers to try and propagate straight native species so that we have it on the Cape, because it's very hard to access it. And as a designer, trust me, a lot of times on the phone, who has what? They go like wildflower, yeah.
So if you go to your garden club plant sale where people are digging up from their yards, are those native plants for the most part?
It's up to the person. They would know.
So but these are plants that have reproduced, right?
Yeah.
So they're, they have 10,000 of them or whatever, so they're putting
Yep.
them away.
Yep.
But they're not necessarily native.
Correct. Or they could be.
They could be.
Right. So,
An example of something that you know is native that's...
well, okay, so butterfly weed. Do people know what butterfly weed is? The orange flowers. They haven't really bastardized that one yet. But I'm trying to think what else. Well, as I said to you, white swan is certainly a coneflower that is not purple, right? So it tells you that it somehow became white. So they were genetically, in the lab, they were genetically hybridized with something else, a tissue culture from something else that would result in the color being white. I'm not a propagation person, so.
So if it says a different name on the tag, you know that it's what you call it?
The cultivar?
Yeah, then you know that it's not good.
Yeah, but you see, I don't want to say they're all bad,
Yeah,
because I would be out of business,
okay.
right? It's a matter of ratio. So let's say you're starting fresh. I have a property that's a new build in Falmouth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate some ornamentals. So maybe some pine trees, that are not from here, right? Because they're beautiful. And maybe some plants that have interesting colors on the leaves that add some beauty to to this area. But for the most part, I'm looking for the straight species. I'm looking for because to me it's like an insurance policy. I know in using that plant that wildlife is going to use it. So it's not that one is bad, it's just an issue of how many of which you have.
To balance it.
Right.
So your guideline is roughly 70-30?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. This is, some of the principles to having nature-based landscapes. So a healthy backyard has soil that's alive. So meaning it has microorganisms in the soil and these little dudes called bacteria and protozoa that feed the roots of these plants. So there is another symbiotic relationship going on. The plant exudes carbohydrates for these little dudes in the soil that are like, Pac-Man, crunching, looking, for the good stuff. And in turn, they send the nutrients up to the plant, the water nutrients up to the plant. So that's where I'm coming from with healthy soil. So this is when I'm talking about healthy soil, this is what I'm talking about. So organic fertilizers, meaning nature stuff that's in there from compost that has broken down, has nutrients in it and organic matter that improves the makeup of the soil. So what it does is so let's say you have really clay soil, depending on what you're putting down, it opens up the pores. So it improves the soil structure itself. It also, as I was saying, it feeds the soil nutrients, feed these organisms, the plant nutrients, and then it feeds the plant. Synthetic fertilizers act quickly. So it gives them, all the plants you see in flower shows, they've all been pumped with fertilizers over the winter or the fall. It's not sustainable because a plant, it's like a kid who's only been fed sugar food. They're only going to want sugar food, and they're not going to be very healthy on it. But with synthetic fertilizers, it's the same thing. You don't give it to me, I'm not going to behave well. I'm going to, start having symptoms that tell you that I'm suffering. Another thing we have learned is biodiversity. So biodiversity, life, variety of life, right? So monoculture is, the perfect example is a lawn. Mono, one type of plant. Something happens to that plant, right? We learned that with the elm trees. We've learned that with a lot of plants. So having a diverse set of plants, so let's say 3 to 5, ones that are, and color is not terribly important, but for our aesthetic, typically we like to have different colors in our gardens. But if you have one plant on your property and that's it, chances are not much wildlife is going to be using that, even if it's a straight species. So if you really want to invite wildlife onto your properties, it's a great idea to plant 5 or 6 varieties at minimum. And it doesn't have to be huge by any means. But the idea is biodiversity invites biodiverse wildlife to your property. So the pollinators are not only the butterflies. A lot of our plants need the moths, they need the beetles, they need the ants. So there are other insects that also provide for these plants that we often don't think about for good reason. I mean, I'm grateful the monarch butterfly has done what it has for people being aware of nature, but there's much more that goes into supporting a plant than just butterflies, right? So I got you here by telling you it is about pollinators, but it's about more than just pollinators. Different types of pollinators. So to me, I call this an expensive food desert. These people do this every year. And this is, whoever was talking to me about shrub with mulch, this is a perfect example of that. So this is doing nothing. It's doing absolutely nothing for nature. They're piling the mulch on every year. I guarantee you that mulch goes flying down into the woods every year. And plus they have invasives on there. But, it's doing nothing for nature whatsoever. What we do know that works for nature, as I said, the ecosystem. So having this connection, right? So when you think about the berries that come out in the fall, there's a reason they come out in the fall. Those shrubs co-evolved with the birds. So the birds rely on those shrubs every fall before they head south to have those berries. It's changing a little bit, and time will tell to what extent in terms of the timing of berries and flowers. But my guess is nature's much smarter than we are. Thank God. And it's going to figure it out. I know that's a very generous way of saying that, but it's going to figure it out. So I say to people, be as mindful of what's happening below the soil as what's happening above the soil. And this is, I always, when I go to properties, I do soil tests. This is the first thing I do, because I want to know what life is in there, what life is not in there. Are there nutrients that are too many of some sort and not enough of another? So, and there's no such thing as bad soil, right? It's called the wrong plant for the soil. So we have sandy soil here. We have nutrient-poor soil here, but there are plants that do really well in it, that came from here, that, that feed these native bees, that feed this native wildlife. So, and you can also have, where I was up in Needham, a very different soil. But I wouldn't have planted the ones down here up there, because the plants that are down here are accustomed to having low fertility, right? Sand does not hold on to nutrients at all. It goes right through.
Tell by my yard.
So, and I also say to people, I've never seen a pretty unhealthy plant. And when people say to me, oh, this is looking like this is doing that, well, there are a number of reasons it could look like that. But oftentimes, there's something with the soil going on. So I'm just making you more aware of that. So this is just a sampling of what is in there doing what we need them to do. And nature does it automatically. If you go through the woods, you'll see the mushrooms, you'll see the leaf litter on the ground. We can take information from these natural settings and put them in our yard. There's no reason we can't. They already figured it out. So choose plants to fit the site conditions instead of altering the site to fit the plants. So I'm doing a wetland meadow in Wareham. When I got the soil test back, I was thrilled. It's just junk. It was horrible, horrible soil. And I was jumping for joy because I know which plants love those conditions. Most people would be like, ugh, you can't grow anything there. Well, you know what? You couldn't grow that there. I can tell you, this is Blazing Star. So again, soil tests are really good. And also switching our thinking from what we want from our landscapes to what do our landscapes need from us. So if you change that paradigm, you immediately start thinking about, as you're all here for it, the pollinators. We're here for the birds. We're here to help nature, right? We want to bring our properties to life. And the roots are a huge help. So there's your grass up there. It's about 2 to 3 inches at most. Native plants have root structures that go much more deeply down into the soil. So when you hear of this story about how native plants are tough, they're resilient, well, there's a good reason. Because they can access that food, they can access that water that this guy can't. I have a friend who refers to turf as a brat because it's never happy, it always wants more, and when it doesn't get what it wants, it screams. It tells you it's not happy. It gets really ugly. So nature is telling us that these are sustainable. So these are prairie grasses, but we have everything in here from Indian grass. These are the plants we can use here. Prairie dropseed, switchgrass, blue stem. All of these plants do really well here. And then we replace that mulch that those people brought in with living mulch. We don't have to bring these in every year. It's you put in plants that can spread more quickly than others or what have you. This is what you get.
So what's the advantage of mulch? And is some of it good and some of it's not?
So you definitely need mulch when you're establishing a yard because you need to maintain the soil temperature and the moisture of the area around that plant. I mean, mulch, yes, has a purpose in terms of helping to keep the weeds at bay. Not always does a great job. It depends on the weed pressure that you have. But it definitely, aesthetically, is very pretty. And that's what we're accustomed to. I have nothing, so by the way, don't ever use red mulch. Don't ever use black mulch, okay? I always say to people, have you ever seen a tree that's red? Or one that's that black? So those are all synthetic chemicals that they're putting in those in that wood. So as organic as you can get, that's what I suggest.
Can I just make
Yeah.
a mulch comment?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we found in our neighborhood, we have unaccepted, private road,
Yep.
is that mulch, if it's too close to the road, when it rains, it all washes into the road and then it goes into the catch basins
Yeah.
and the drains and
Yep.
it clogs your drains.
Yep.
So it's really good to be careful about
Thank you.
where you place the mulch
Yep.
in terms of the road.
Absolutely. And you know what would be do a much better job there is a plant. Because they filter the water. They absorb the water. So,
We have someone who clear cut all the trees.
oh dear.
Put a lawn in, like put a whole mulch lawn, and it's completely washing down everything.
Yeah.
Filling out our vegetated wetlands and causing,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's important to think about everything.
Yes. Well, gratefully this year at the Cape Cod Landscaping Association, they did a great job of teaching this type of thing to landscapers. That doesn't mean they're going to change overnight. They won't. But as homeowners, if you know this and you have a sense of what's better, that's what this book is all about. You can say, hey, you know what? I don't need, and plus with mulch, people, every year, they make money on mulch. Every year you keep piling it on, you don't take any away. Oh my God.
I have a question about
Yeah.
So if you're if you're planting like meadow flowers,
Mm-hmm.
you're using dried leaves as mulch, but dried leaves are like forest.
Okay,
Is this like, I'm confused.
that's fine.
It's okay?
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
meadow flowers don't mind that you're putting forest material on it?
So it depends on the tree. So, some are more acidic than others, and also depends on what plants you're putting in. So I personally use leaf mulch. That's already been decomposed. But, are these oak leaves? I'm just curious.
They're a mix, oaks, maple.
Okay, yeah. It's not going to hurt it. I mean, right now, it's protecting them. As long as it's not too close to the base of the plants, you want to leave a space. So, because that introduces insects and disease when mulch is right up against the stem of a tree or a plant or anything. So you always want to leave a collar, a little bit of a collar for that. And these are just examples of plants that cover the ground quickly. I have a website that has all this information on, so you don't have to write all this down. But our wild strawberry, oh my gosh, is it beautiful. So I have a friend in Sagamore Beach, that's where I live, who has an island that was all weeds. We started putting in strawberries about when I first moved here 3 years ago. It's strawberries. And and those are strawberries that you can eat. It's not like the big strawberries that you think of, but wildlife uses them, and you can eat them. They're not going to be as sweet, but they spread quickly, and they change color in the fall. So, just aesthetic reasons too. And people always say to me, I don't know what to do about dry shade. There are plants for everything. There are plants for every condition you can possibly imagine. There's a native plant for it. The poppy is more of a wet condition. So I'm just giving you a heads up. The Christmas fern, I use like crazy here because it's dry. It can tolerate dry, and it's evergreen. So and caterpillars love it, and deer don't like it. Yeah,
Clover, what about clover?
clover's good.
Yeah, I've heard that would work here.
No, absolutely. It feeds nitrogen into the soil. I didn't want to get too sciencey here, but there are plants that definitely put nitrogen into the soil that make it readily available to the plants in the garden. Yeah.
Could you comment on the timing of the emergence of insects from leaf litter?
Yeah.
Because there are clumps of leaves, and I don't know when it's okay to remove them.
Yep.
When have the bumblebees come out from under the leaf litter?
Right.
Anything about the timing?
So when you have, doesn't have to be the day before exactly, but when you have 3 consecutive days of above 50 degrees
Oh, okay.
so now.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, my yard looks like hell because I have sticks, going everywhere.
Uh-huh.
I haven't had a chance to get to it, but
I just don't want to remove it too soon.
nope, it's not too soon.
Okay.
Not too soon.
Bees come out from under there?
Yeah, there's some ground bees, hornets and bees. Yeah, absolutely. So if we also look in nature, you notice that things are in layers. And this is just thinking ahead, So nature uses every single layer that's available. So the birds prefer to be up on the top of the canopy so they can see who's going to come and eat them before they go to access their food. So every layer has a purpose. It doesn't mean you need to have all these layers, but as going forward, it's good to have sizes for pollinators, for everything. And these are just some plants that replace our typical hedgerows. So as I said, I work at Highness Country Gardens once a week. The number of people, and I'm not judging, but the number of people that ask for privet, I just wanted, it's invasive. And they just want privet, and I think, oh my God, there's so many better options. But these are just samples of, arrowwood, viburnums, serviceberry. I mean, it gets a bit bigger. But sweet gale does beautifully here.
Does that have a flower?
Yes.
Are those good for shade, like underneath a very tall basswood that has a lot of privet? Would those be a good thing to replace? A shrub, not a ground cover?
Right. So viburnum depends on the viburnum. The black haw viburnum can take full shade. Yep. So it depends. If it were an evergreen tree that never loses its needles, you know, and it's always shady all the time, I would do black haw for sure.
This is a basswood.
Right, so it's deciduous. Yep.
Say it again. Black hawk.
BLACKHAW.
A question, and you said, I know the privet's invasive, but, I mean, does it hurt any of the insects or the birds?
So the way that invasive plants hurt anything is that they take over habitats that otherwise would have straight species in them. So the berries of a privet don't have the protein levels or the calories or anything that, let's say, a chokeberry has. They do something, right? It's sort of like a sugar kick. It's a temporary fix, but it's not going to sustain them in any way. And what happens is they eat it, they poop it out, and then you have more. So, and just to straighten something out, not all non-natives are invasive. I just want people to realize that. There are plenty of non-natives that are not invasive. So invasive is when a plant takes over, it colonizes, it takes over an area. And I'm sure most of you know what Oriental bittersweet is. You know what, greenbrier with the green, oh God, they hurt. So those are the plants that take over and reduce the good stuff. So this is just an example. So successional bloom is also really important for pollinators and wildlife. So this was a garden I did in Wareham, and I just wanted to share with you an example. So this is just spring, what's going to happen this spring. For those early pollinators coming in, they're going to have the red columbine. They're going to have the pussy toes, which is an awesome plant. I'm bringing it down here. And other ground covers. So the early bloomers are really important for wildlife. This is also on my website.
Is blueberry hard to grow?
Hard?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a lot of it, and I just wondered if,
People don't think about it.
oh,
It's not hard.
okay.
Yeah. And so in the summer, I have an ornamental grass, the prairie dropseed. Like I was telling you about the nitrogen fixers. So our legumes, so for example, what is it called? Purple leaves this time of year. Oh, it's so pretty. Lupine is a nitrogen fixer. So, and also structure. You want some shrub, you want just herbaceous means no wood. So a plant that is like a purple coneflower that doesn't have any wood to it, it's just, that soft tissue. So that's what that means. And then, more ground covers. Our bearberry that is from here, I've seen it out in Plymouth like crazy. It's great for erosion control. It's beautiful. It has drought tolerant, full sun. It can also take the shade. Grows relatively quickly, but it holds the soil back. It has deep roots that go in, and they're great for erosion control. So people are often asking me about reducing lawns to put in more plants. When I moved into my house, I had about 2/3 of the lawn. I removed 2/3 of the lawn, but the way I did it was the organic way. And one of the organic ways is to pay somebody to come in and just slice it, not dig it out. You don't want to be digging it out, because when you dig it out, you're taking all those good microorganisms away. So it'd be like a blade going in and just cutting them up in pieces. So either slice or I use ram board and I cover it with mulch. So, and by the next season, it has biodegraded. You might still see some of it, but the weeds are gone, the grass is gone. And this was just like a little row that I started with on the side of my house. But now it's blooming like crazy. So you can buy it at Home Depot. It's a material that contractors use when they're working in your house to protect your floors. So they come in rolls of like 3 feet by 100 feet. Examples of these amazing insects that we often don't see, but when we capture them, it's so beautiful, it's so wonderful. But, this is proof that the flora and the fauna, they come together. And there are some bees, there's some insects that are specialists, which mean they're only going to use, and it doesn't mean you have to be the one to get that plant, but for example, I showed you the swallowtail caterpillar earlier. They only want spice bush. So if somebody's going to go shopping and say, can you get a spice bush? Because then you're going to have beautiful swallowtail butterflies. So, we can drive ourselves crazy trying to fit everything in for everybody. You can't. But if more people have something, chances are you're going to be providing a lot more. Because in terms of the caterpillars, only 5% make 75% of the caterpillar food. And that's the oak tree in my backyard. And I was so grateful that came with the house. But I'm sure you've heard of Doug Tallamy's Keystone plants. So the oak trees, the cherries, the willows. I have his book. I could look it up. And so forth. So those are the plants that provide for the greatest number of caterpillars, species of caterpillars. So here we have, what do we have here? So many of is it black cherry? That's a cherry. So that's native to here. They use that. So oak trees are number one, but not everybody has to have an oak tree. If there are some oak trees in the neighborhood, that's awesome. The butterfly bush provides nothing for caterpillars at all. 0. Which means that no butterflies come out of that plant. Because what it is, but this is where I make this point, it's a sugar high for butterflies, so it gets them to your property, right? That's great. It's good to have some native plants there that the butterfly can then utilize after it's gotten its sugar high. So that will sustain it. So that's what I refer to as biomass. I don't want to, again, get too sciencey, but the larger diversity of plants that you have, and the more plants that you have, the greater the chance that you're going to be supporting something. Even cultivars. I mean, if something's in bloom, it's going to attract wildlife. But it's good to have the meat and potatoes there for them when they get there. So just more on the Keystone plants. I'm sure when people think of goldenrod, they think, oh my God, it's so awful. So this is not a design talk, but there are goldenrods that definitely are beautiful. They do their thing. They're just as valuable to wildlife as the thug. And they're beautiful. So this is a low-growing one, zigzag. It's more of it probably gets to about 3 feet tall. So it can be used as a ground cover. The blue stem goldenrod is great for shade. That's why I put these guys up there. And again, as I said, even if you had just these plants in your yard, so columbine for the spring, there's your monarda, wild bergamot on the upper right, the purple, cardinal flower, great for hummingbirds. The caterpillars love sedges. So woodland sunflower, it blooms midsummer all through the fall, can take some shade. These are plants that are like keystone herbaceous plants, keystone plants that provide for a lot in a lawn. Oh, I went backwards, or I showed it again. So this is an example of an alternative lawn. I'm doing one in Cambridge, and the people, so you can leave it the way you see it on the upper right. So it gets this tall, and if you left it alone, it would just have these waves in the lawn. It only needs to be cut once a year, nothing more than that. And it stays like that.
Grass, it's just that kind.
No, there are other carex as well, but this is one that's used a lot. And then the barren strawberry is another strawberry, but a different family, that grows in the shade and takes over an area very quickly. That has beautiful, beautiful yellow flowers. So with lawn reduction, you don't need to take up your entire lawn, right? There are a lot of people there are some people that do, who immediately convert to meadows or something. They have a lot of money, God bless them. Most of us have sections that we can use, maybe, right? So if it's an area that you don't use as much as you used to, the kids are not there anymore, or what have you, or if you're sick of it, as I did with the ram board or just with a slicer, just take sections. Do a little bit at a time.
Can you do it yourself, or
Yeah,
what do you use?
the ram board, and then I put like 4 inches of mulch on top.
No, but how do you slice the grass off, you said?
You need a machine for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
You can just smother the grass, really.
Right, well, the same thing with the ram board. Yeah.
okay. Oh, okay.
Yep. So this was a property that I worked at in Katuitt. They wanted no lawn. And these were the conditions that they had. And the goals were to, put in the majority of straight native species, reduce the lawn, help control erosion at the base there that goes right into the street. So you have an edit there. And so this was the slicer. That was the slicer. And it's down there.
So it's like a motorized thing.
Yes, yes. And so we cut slices on either side of that walkway,
Yeah.
and just filled it in with lots of different textures, lots of different colors, plants that'll do something throughout the seasons. And these are the plants that we used in that. This is also on my website. So these were the shade and fairly drought tolerant. Fairly drought tolerant. I need my water.
So they're all perennials, right?
Yep. So they don't have to do anything this year. So I'll put it to you this way. When I see moss on someone's yard, I'm like jumping for joy.
Okay, yeah.
Because it tells me what kind of soil it is. It's moist and it's acidic, but also it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
And you don't have to do anything to it.
Never mow it.
No.
It's nice and spongy.
Yes. Yes. It's beautiful. I mean, to me, it's green. And I see it in the winter. It's just wonderful. So these are the plants that are more or less, as we're turning into the summer. As I said, summer. So aromatic sumac, which is that blob in the lower corner of the far right picture, and its roots go way down, and that's going to hold that soil in place. And it turns a beautiful red in the fall. So, we can use these plants, obviously for our interest too, not just wildlife. And those are some others.
Do you have to dig them up eventually and separate them? And
So we put plants in that are cluster growers,
okay.
or clump growers, sorry.
Yeah.
So, but except for that aromatic sumac, we want it to do this.
Okay.
We want it to spread. So less plants, right? Less money. So that was the end product. That's what we finished with. And she hired these landscapers this year, and I said, please tell them to just leave it alone. There's nothing they have to do, nothing, except you get a drought. So this was another property, also in Wareham, and it was just all lawn. We're going to do more, but we did this huge strip along one side. And I'm not kidding you, when, did I ever put this one up? I did. Wow, I'm losing it. When we took those plants out of the truck, birds and the butterflies were like, circling us. I'm not kidding you. I wish I had a video because it was like they were waiting. They were waiting for somebody. So sorry about that. But this one I wanted to show you because these all serve particular purposes. So the big blue stem is beautiful, number one. Number two, the seed heads are valuable to birds. It has deep roots, and insects love it. Yarrow blooms a long, long time. So if you want a plant that's going to be blooming a long time. So for example, I'll give you an example of non-native that I use this with. I use it with mint. Oh God, now I'm going to forget again. The low mint, the purple mint. Oh God. Yes, thank you, whoever said that. So there's one that's called Grow Low or something. Walker's Low, see? I need you. They both bloom for a really long time. So, and that nepeta attracts a lot of insects, but they're also getting food from other plants on my property. The spotted bee balm, not a great picture of it, but is that a fascinating plant? Oh my God. So it levels. and it has dots underneath. And what's great about it is you don't get the parent plant back the next year, but you get more of them. So they self-seed nicely, and so I look for plants that have height, that have long color, that are going to produce on their own. And the mountain mint is just if you want every insect in your area in your yard, mountain mint. You'll see them all at one time. They're all there.
So what about dandelions?
Yeah,
So just leave them?
for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're non-native, but they are,
Yeah, but it's
depends how you define native.
it's offering some value to the early pollinators coming in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and they make great salads. So this is a book in particular, but if you go online, you can find such good information about alternatives. So instead of having the burning bush, have a red chokeberry that turns red in the fall, and has white flowers in the spring, and has these beautiful berries that support the birds as they're moving on. So for everything I plant, I add a handful of compost, because again, that's like my insurance policy. So I know I'm helping the soil with nutrients and with the structure of the soil, so that the water permeates nicely. So a lot of people get overwhelmed, and I understand. So there are things, I call them butterfly pods or pads, where you just take a small area and create something. Start small. There's no need to go full force into this. And as I said, some cultivars and annuals, they add color. So shooting for ratio, again, is ideal. So this is on my property, it's, yeah.
Wow.
And so this is what I mean by biomass. So we could just have these plants on our property, and they would all do something throughout the seasons, and they would all provide for wildlife throughout the seasons. So up on the upper left is what's called anemone. Anemone canadensis. There's your butterfly weed. This I love. It's called bloodroot. It takes the shade, and it really is that red, and it's a long bloomer. Clethra on the far right, beautiful smell in the spring or summer when it blooms. There's your columbine again. There is a better picture. I'm going to find one of the Monata punctata, spotted bee balm. Berries. Boneset is another plant that has tons of value to wildlife. And I'm sure most of you know what black-eyed Susans are. Yeah. So, and this one, if you want funky structure and interest in your garden, get buttonbush, because buttonbush, it's beautiful. And the plants do a lot. So these are just samples of ones for around here. I already mentioned the bearberry. So these pussy toes are awesome. One of the reasons they're so awesome, other than attracting tons of insects, is when those flowers are done doing their thing. So it's a ground cover. It spreads slowly, but you can step on it. So I've made pathways for people out of this. Instead of using lawn or something else, it's soft. It's lovely. And clusters are really important. So if you have 5 plants, instead of having 1, 1, 1, 1, think about the energy of an insect, right? Very limited, or a bird. So they don't waste any energy. It's better for them to have 5 of that plant over here, 5 of another plant over here, and so bundles and bundles. Because our native bees can travel a much less far than the bumblebees. Bumblebees are not native bees. So, if you want the native bees, it's important to think about having, it's like, the buffet for when you have a really important family come over. You want all the good stuff for them, right? It's the same thing, same thinking. And density in clusters. So, again, there are plants that spread. So I did bring some books. One of them was put out by the Wild Seed Project in Maine. I don't know if people are familiar with that organization. But they have, in this book, they have what they call guilds. So it's like a cheat sheet for what's going to work well on your property. So they grow at a similar rate. They don't outcompete one another. And they have interest throughout the seasons. So for bare naked slopes, okay, we're looking at plants, obviously that are tough. Yeah, wood aster, bleeding heart, Pennsylvania sedge, and wood poppy. So they're all, those are multiple seasons doing something. And, once you have a better sense of what your soil is and how plants do after you plant them, you'll know what else you can add in. They also have one for trees and shrubs. But it's just, it's a great resource.
Planting like native plants. Do you consider the ocean, like the salt air, does that affect plants at all?
Depends on how close you are. So if you're right on the ocean, there's some plants that can tolerate that much better. So for example, our coastal goldenrod, it's meant to be here. It has a waxy coating on the outside of the leaves. And you'll see them on beaches if you know what they are. But, heat, drought, and salt. Wow. Same thing with switchgrass, Panicum virgatum. They're meant to be here. So they can tolerate it fine. And I think in the reference I gave you, I'm hoping, but again, it's on my website, for coastal plants that do well in coastal regions, that obviously can take salt. If you go online, I'm sure you can find native plants that don't have roots that need to go down very deeply, that could take, if it's sunny or not. So I refer to these plants as crevice plants. So they grow well in a crevice, right, in little spots. So as a cheat sheet, so pussy toes does really well there, as does, because I find them in my yard. They just grow in cracks. Verbena, hastata, I'm forgetting the common name, sorry, blue vervain. So plants that you see that just sort of on their own show up in cracks in the sun, you can use those.
Moss and clover top.
Yeah. But they will help. So I created some gardens in Needham. That's my poor son watering 6 years ago. But as I said, if people can just work together, that would be so good. And that's what we're trying to do. So lastly, I'm on a national committee. I did research on the plastic pots issue. So every plant you buy comes in a plastic pot. Those aren't recycled. 95 to 98% of them end up in landfills. So I'm working with major growers and with nurseries, to collect the material. It's a long story. I have a website that's it, right at the top, that'll tell you what I'm doing. And I'm trying to get nurseries to work together to collect pots and to have it so that we can take them to a location where they do get recycled. So I've crossed the country looking for other recyclers that take this material, and they exist, but there aren't many. But I just wanted to mention it to you because I was approached by somebody at the Bourne, I hate the word dump, but dump.
Nice one.
Thank you.
Very solid waste management.
Okay. Who said they would be interested in trying to set up, stations. But it has to be done in a certain way so that it can then easily be transported, because they're going all the way up to Michigan. That's where they go.
Wow.
So East Jordan Plastics, they recycle hort material and they make new pots out of it. So, and they make other products out of it. So thank you very much. If you could, of course you can have your hydrangeas, but have some butterfly weed too. So one trick for ticks is mulch. They don't like to walk across mulch. So if you're on a woodland and you're afraid of what's going to come into your yard, put a strip of mulch across it. So they will, stay in the woods. Thank you.